Villages Vitality listeners, I've got some good news for you. If you're listening via our Buzzsprout feed, you should see a fan mail button. You can ask questions or leave me comments as a text, or in our new feature, you can send it as a voicemail. If you'd like a response, make sure you leave your name, email address, and cell phone number.
Welcome to Season 8 of Villages Vitality Life, Seniors Life Unscripted. In this new season, we talk to leaders of clubs and interesting folks who live in and around the villages. We also talk to people who have information vital to seniors. You will get perspectives of what is happening in and around the villages, Florida. In addition, in this new season, we will add more information for all seniors. We are a listener-supported podcast.
This is Mike Roth on Villages Vitality, Senior Life Unscripted. Today, I'm here with Dr. Adeel. Thanks for joining me, Dr. Khan.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Mike.
He is a hematologist-oncologist and an epidemiologist. He serves as an assistant professor of medicine and public health at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. He is the director of the myeloma epidemiology research and clinical director of monoclonal pathy precursor clinic. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan Medical School, Harvard, T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Columbia Mailman School of Public Health. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks so much for having me. And I'm pleased to have so many syllables in my titles. Thanks so much for the introduction, Mike.
You're one of the longest titles I've ever had to put into the show. Did I mispronounce any of the words too bad?
It's epidemiology, but yeah, and then myeloma. But yeah, a lot of lengthy terms there. And that just, I think, speaks to how specific in some ways my field is.
So, with that kind of a background in education, Adeel, what made you go into the field of blood cancers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think growing up, I was always very interested by cancer in general, things that had touched my own life with family members. And my interest in medicine was pretty early on, really from grade school up. And in part, I think I was influenced by my parents, both of whom are doctors, different type, but doctors. And when I got to medical school, I found the blood cancers just to be so fascinating, just because of how much research there was in the field, how there was the ability to now change people's outcomes in a positive light. And so while people going through the medical journey often change their minds a lot of times, from my second year of medical school, I said I wanted to do blood cancers and I never looked back. And so that is something I've stuck with, and I'm very happy to be in the field now and to make my humble contributions.
Did you grow up in the Texas area?
I grew up mostly in Oklahoma, but I lived around. So I lived between New Hampshire, New York, and Massachusetts, and that pinball settled eventually in Oklahoma, where my formative years were then, from middle school, high school, and college. And so when I was wrapping up then my medical training and public health training, that was in Boston. And my wife and I we welcomed our first child. We wanted to be closer to home, which was the Southwestern region. So we've been very pleased to be here.
Now, you specialize in multiple. Why should seniors care about this blood cancer disease?
Yeah. So multiple myeloma is a specific blood cancer that has become increasingly common for kind of interesting reasons. So for one, I'll say it's sort of a funny name. The name multiple myeloma is one that has been historically what it's been called for decades and decades. But really what it is that it's plasma cell cancer. So plasma cells are a type of white blood cell that's in all of us that live primarily in our bone marrow, and they're responsible for making antibodies. And when they become abnormal, they don't stop making antibodies, but they start making altered ones. And that's what we call M proteins or monoclonal proteins. But it's something that we can measure. And when they become so significantly abnormal that they're cancerous, that situation of plasma cell cancer is really what we call multiple myeloma, or simply just myeloma. And it's one that historically was not that common. It was about number 14 or 15 most common in terms of incidence in the United States, and still hangs around that. But it's become increasingly prevalent because people live longer and longer with the therapies and the treatments that we have now. to the point where now globally, it actually is the second most common blood cancer worldwide. And it's,
Second most common.
that's right.
And the most common is
Most common,
leukemia.
usually CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, also called small lymphocytic lymphoma, is usually what's considered number one in that category. And number two now by most cancer epidemiology metrics has become multiple myeloma over the past roughly 10 years. And
Are there any
myeloma,
therapies for multiple myeloma now?
absolutely. So for one, multiple myeloma is a cancer of the older adult. So the median age of onset is 69 years old. And treatment has been historically a challenge. And I'd say that this has been the case up until kind of the drug revolution that we've had really somewhere around like the kind of the mid 2000s to 2010s and beyond, where conventionally treatment was given with kind of harsh, old-fashioned chemotherapies. And this worked a little bit, and this was really before my era in the field. It worked definitely a little bit, and those are contributions that some very wise individuals made. But really nowadays, with the targeted therapies that we've had, we have been very much able to expand survival and meaningful quality of life to years and years beyond what it was just decades before. So if I give some numbers to it, the median survival for multiple myeloma in kind of the era past, so talking about like 90s, for instance, was about 3 years. 3 years for all comers with multiple myeloma. And then from around
What is it today?
so nowadays it's in excess of 9 to 10 years median survival. So over triple. And there are some people who essentially live with it as sort of just a chronic disease. It's something that just lives with them. And because we've had so many successful treatments, when something doesn't go well, we can move them down to another line and so on. And it gives them meaningful quality of life.
What are those treatments?
So in the days long past, it was, again, kind of an old fashioned, what we called cytotoxic or classical chemotherapies. These were what we called alkylating agents. So oral melphalan, kind of old stuff that people stereotypically think about as chemotherapy. The nausea was prominent, hair loss, that sort of thing. And because plasma cells are a very specific type of cell, in a way, they've been pretty exploitable. They just have some unique features that make them a little bit more particular. And those are just different avenues for possible treatments. So now we have still a lot of, so what we call conventional treatments. And these are things like immunomodulatory drugs like lenalidomide, pomalidomide. We've had that for years and years. We call proteasome inhibitors like bortezomib or carfilzomib. Again, we've had those for years, and those have worked well. And then what's really started to change the game were the immunotherapies. And these are treatments that are able to harness a patient's own immune system against the multiple myeloma cells themselves, and has shown fantastic efficacy since their onset in the scene around 5-6 years ago.
Those are the latest treatments?
Yeah, absolutely. And they come in basically two broad flavors. So when we talk about the immunotherapies and multiple myeloma, this is very similar to other cancer types as well. But we have two broad categories that we speak of. One is that we have the cellular therapies, and then the other we have what we call the bispecific antibodies, and I'll delve more into both of them. So the cellular therapies, and the specific one I'm talking about here is CAR T therapy. CAR T therapy has really been a game changer for multiple myeloma, and it's CAR-T.
-T.
Yeah, exactly. Chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. And again, a lot of syllables. What is going on with that? And it's a treatment where we take someone's T cells, we pherese them out, and we send them to a manufacturer. And that can be a different number of companies depending on the product. And what they do is that they then bioengineer those T cells from the patient into CAR T cells by basically putting a different receptor on their surface that can target some molecule on the multiple myeloma cells. And in converting it to CAR T cells, that becomes a bona fide treatment in and of itself. And then we take a patient, say, okay, the CAR T cells are ready. It's go time. We give them a different type of chemotherapy to just knock down some of their native white blood cells so that, in a sense, the CAR T cells have space, take up residence. You infuse those in, and then that's essentially it. You just watch after that. Manage sort of any untoward side effects that can come up. There are things that can happen, but that ends up being a treatment in of itself, and it can give people years and years and years. And there are two FDA CAR T products that we have approved. One is called ide-cel, the other is cilta-cel. And ide-cel is also called Abecma. It's made by Bristol Myers Squibb. That was the first one. The other one is cilta-cel, which is also called Carvykti, and that's made by Johnson & Johnson. And we had data presented last year at our American Society of Clinical Oncology conference in June of 2025 that showed that in some select patients who get cilta-cel, they have a long-term remission that appears to be essentially curative, looks like a cure. I say that with quotation marks here, even at 5 years beyond this
Have a long enough term test to prove that it's
Exactly.
an actual cure.
Exactly right. And that really has been just a game changer because, for one, historically, and this goes all through my training, myeloma was felt to be incurable, increasingly treatable, very treatable nowadays, right? We got, as I said, survival over tripled for most patients that people can do very well. But we still felt like the cure word was elusive. We just didn't have that C word attached. And now the gears have really started to shift where we think that, probably in a good select number of cases, certainly not everyone, but we might actually be able to cure these folks. And that's just, a phenomenal improvement and just a great service for patients.
How many years is the longest cure that you have now?
Well, there are some people who have decades and decades. And I'll give one famous example. A great patient advocate who was actually one of the heads of one of the multiple myeloma foundations, Gilad Baru, he has had multiple myeloma and he speaks about this, so I'm not, revealing something that's secretive. He speaks of his journey. He was diagnosed in his 20s. He's around 60 now.
Wow. So
Yeah.
he's had 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, he's had
And that's with his CAR T.
he's had a number of treatments, all through that time. He's kind of been through different eras of therapy, but it speaks to what success can be. Now that is atypical. I do have to caveat that, but the fact that it's possible and that we have someone as prominent as him who shares his journey and has been able to advocate for his fellow patients in that manner, it just shows you what the field can do and what we hope to do more and more of.
Let's take a short break now and listen to what Dr. Craig Curtis talk about. Give us a tip on Alzheimer's disease, maybe even Parkinson's.
When we talk about the causes of heart attacks and strokes and peripheral vascular disease, we all know about things such as diabetes, smoking, and poor diet choices. Those are all called modifiable risk factors. You can change those and you can lower your risk. And then if we talk about non-modifiable risk factors, things you cannot change, there's a cholesterol that has been labeled the ghost cholesterol.
I've heard of good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Now I have to worry about a ghost cholesterol?
That's right. There's a cholesterol known as lipoprotein A. That cholesterol has been known about for a long time. However, scientists over the last decade have discovered that this is one of the major risk factors for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease such as strokes, and peripheral vascular disease such as problems in the legs. And what they've discovered is that this is a genetically linked lipoprotein. What that means is it runs in families. And unfortunately, we've had no way to modify this.
To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. I'm back with Dr. Adeel Khan. Dr. Khan, in the current state of research on multiple myeloma, how are you guys, doctors, AI to better outcomes?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence has had its hands in different ways all across the research spectrum. And I think some of the most interesting things that we're doing now is in some of our drug development and then backing up maybe before that in more of what we call the basic science realm and just trying to understand myeloma cells a little bit more. So as time has gone on, we've had a lot of data sitting around myeloma. And with some of the studies that we get from patients, we really can have, down to the level of specific mutations in a given myeloma cell. That's what we call next generation sequencing, or NGS. And it's something that we can run off when we do the diagnostics on a patient to then see in those myeloma cells, we do genome sequencing. We look, what are all the alterations that we can characterize? And there are billions of possibilities, quite frankly. And a lot of those are not known to be actionable. It's something that we see, and it's a great fascination. We don't know what to do with it because one, there's just so many possibilities. Two, again, what do you do with them? Right? Are they something that are exploitable targets? Are they just kind of incidental? We don't know. And so there's been a lot of interest in taking AI to help us sift through that, to actually delve into patterns and see, does that tie to patient outcomes? Does that tie to certain socio-demographic factors? Do we just see something more common in this domain X versus that domain Y that might help us understand what's going on with those myeloma cells a little bit better? That's very much within the
Now,
research realm.
is there anything that seniors can do to avoid myeloma?
It's a great question, and one that's had a lot of interest over the years. The short answer is that we don't know. So there's a lot of unknowns still on what happens with multiple myeloma and what we call myelomogenesis. Like, why does it happen? It seems to be kind of a random event in those white blood cells, those plasma cells. And about 50% of cases seem to be traced to something that happens on chromosome 14 in a specific area of a gene that is involved with antibody production. Now, again, why that happens, we don't know. And that's still roughly about 50%. So that's by no means characterizing all cases. And then we see some
run in families.
Yeah. And then we see like this clustering in families and a certain kind of racial ethnic pattern too that has not been well explained. So for instance, if you have a first degree family member with multiple myeloma or a similar, what we call monoclonal gammopathy, a precursor to myeloma condition, your risk ends up being roughly about twofold. And why that is not clear. And then we see again some other patterns too. There's way more myeloma in certain racial, ethnic, sex groups than others. So we see more males than females. We see it more in people of African American or African ancestry, then less in Asians, and then in people of more Hispanic ancestry, sort of up and down the spectrum. And why that is not really clear. So
you don't really have a clear trend.
I certainly don't. I think whoever figures that out is going to be very famous, but we just don't know. But we've seen that in numerous studies, and it speaks to the fact that, again, there's just probably stuff we just don't know about it, and there's a pattern that has been lurking that we haven't been able to characterize. So hopefully more to come in the years as we delve more into it.
Does diet play any role in controlling the disease after diagnosis?
In a classical sense, we don't know that formally does, but I will say that we increasingly think that there is definitely a role for some lifestyle aspects. And we have some work done out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of our nation's preeminent cancer hospitals, where they looked at people with multiple myeloma who were given more of a plant-based diet compared to what were their conventional dietary habits. And they did see advantages within their disease. Now, it's still early data, but they've done some single cell analyses showing that there does seem to be some benefit. Now, whether that is specific to the disease per se, or the fact that when we make certain dietary foods like this across all kinds of diseases, we see benefit, that remains to be seen. And it's still a very active area of research. But I think no one does poorly by having a better diet and lifestyle. So I think there's reason to be thoughtful of that, regardless of whether it specifically helps myeloma per se.
And the other question that comes up these days is, do the GLP-1 medicines help or hurt in the treatment of myeloma, multiple myeloma?
And interestingly, we have one paper that looked at a precursor to multiple myeloma, something called MGUS, which, again, a lot of syllables here, stands for monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. And MGUS is a very early precursor to myeloma. And in this paper, they did see some vague benefit to GLP-1s, but it's not clear that that's causal at all, that it actually is causing the benefit, or it's just the fact that promotes a healthier weight and healthier situation for the patient in general. Much more to be seen as time goes on.
Now, if someone suspects that they have this disease or been diagnosed with one of the precursors, is there any way they can contact you or get more information from your hospital?
Absolutely. So we have a specialized clinic that we focus on multiple myeloma, as well as actually its precursor conditions. That's that monoclonal gammopathy precursor clinic. And a lot of the other big cancer centers nationwide have similar ventures there. all as a service to patients, that as we recognize that there's more and more people with myeloma and those precursor conditions, this is the way to serve people. So yeah, absolutely. We are always looking for people, one, to serve, to help us with our research, and to see if we can continue to move the field forward.
Is there a telephone number that people can call?
Mhm.
Seniors like to call instead of looking at a website.
Absolutely. We can put that in the show notes as well. We also have some digital referral mechanisms, so there's plenty of ways to get a hold of us. What I'll also say is that depending on where someone is located, there are other similar clinics that can serve people here, but our general phone number for UT Southwestern is 214-648-3111.
Dr. Khan, is there anything that I should have asked you that I've forgotten to ask you?
I think what I would like to say is the field of myeloma is interesting. I think it's very relevant for seniors because of the fact that this is a disease largely of older adults. Great strides and improvements, including just so much more in the pipeline. That would be a whole other podcast. So in our pursuit of trying to attack this disease, it's really been a pleasure of mine to be able to serve people in the field, to move it forward. And I think the next few years, we're going to see even more advancements as we have so many more of these immunotherapies and targeted therapies coming down the pipeline.
I want to thank you for being with us today, Dr. Khan.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Is it okay if we stay in touch with you if you come up with any more breakthroughs?
Please do.
Good. Thanks.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Duane Romick, Paul Sorgan, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. The way our show grows is with your help. Text your friends about this show if you enjoyed listening. Use the fan mail button on our homepage, villagesvitality.life, to leave comments. Be sure to include your name, email, and phone number. We thank everyone for listening. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2026, all rights reserved.